The universe would have to be a certain way. It has to have certain prerequisites. For example, the universe would have to have a degree of orderliness to it. If the universe was really just totally chance and random, you could never learn anything about it because nothing would be the same from one second to the next. There'd be no continuity. There'd be no order or organization to it. So an orderly universe is one of the things that's necessary for knowledge. Our mind would have to be capable of rational thought, right? If you're insane, then you're not going to be able to have knowledge. If you can't think rationally, at least part of the time, you're not going to be able to have knowledge of things. Your senses would have to be basically reliable, wouldn't they? Your eyes and your ears would have to interface with the real universe and transmit information to your brain in a way that is sensible and accurate. Those are prerequisites for the knowledge. And my point is only the Bible can make sense of those things. It's only the biblical worldview that can account for or justify why it is that we have confidence in these prerequisites for knowledge. Yes, I would expect the universe to be organized in the Christian worldview because it is an organizer. There's a mind, the mind of God, who organizes the universe and upholds it in a consistent way. Yes, I would expect the brain would be rational in the Christian worldview because God made my mind. I'm made in the image of God. He's infinitely rational, and since I'm made in his image, I have a finite ability to be rational. And so you see, my proof for the Bible, and not just biblical creation, but really the biblical worldview, is that if the Bible were not true, it would be impossible to prove that anything is true. Because in order for us to go about proving things, we have to use these prerequisites for knowledge that only the Bible can account for. That's a different kind of an argument, but boy, is it powerful. You learn this argument, nobody will be able to come back for it. Now, I'm going to spend the rest of the time just kind of fleshing this out a little bit, because I know it's a little bit abstract if this is the first time you've heard of this way of thinking, but it's very powerful. There are certain things that we use. I'm going to talk about some of these prerequisites for knowledge. Laws of logic. You use laws of logic all the time. Like the law of non-contradiction, which says you can't have A and not A at the same time and in the same way, right? In the same sense. You know that. You don't get up in the morning and you're sitting there in bed thinking, I'm going to go get a shower. Wait a minute, maybe I'm already in the shower. Nobody thinks that, right? You know if I'm here, I'm not there, and so on. Because you understand that contradictions can't occur in reality. That you're applying the law of non-contradiction. Whether you knew what it was called or not, you use it all the time. You might not be able to list any of the laws of logic, but you all know at least some of them because you couldn't function in God's universe without laws of logic. But have you ever thought about why there are laws of logic? It makes sense in the Christian worldview because there's a lawgiver. Yes, I have a standard of correct reasoning, and my standard is God. All truth is in God, and so his mind sets the standard for what makes something true. Laws of logic stem from God's thinking, and so laws of logic make sense in the universe that God made according to what the Bible has to tell us about the character and nature of God and the character and nature of the universe. But why would there be laws of logic in a chance universe? Ever thought about that? Why would there be laws at all with no lawgiver? Who decides what they are? Why should they be universally true? Why should the universe feel compelled to obey them? Some secularists will say, well, human beings invented laws of logic. I think, well, no, because first of all, if we invented laws of logic, we could have invented them differently. Right? We could have said, okay, instead of there being a law of non-contradiction, we'll make a law of contradiction, which says you have to contradict yourself. Contradictions are true. Now, you'd find very quickly that won't work. You see, we're not allowed to just invent our own laws of logic. They're there whether we like it or not, so we didn't invent them. If we invented them, why does the universe obey them? That's what I want to know. I mean, we invent laws like speed limits, but the universe doesn't have to obey that. When the meteor comes through, it doesn't say, 55, I got to slow down, right? When the meteor streaks through the atmosphere. The universe it ignores our laws, but it obeys God's laws, you see. I can make sense of that in my worldview because the universe is upheld by the mind of God. It's the mind of God that is the basis for the law of no contradiction because God doesn't deny himself, the Bible says. He can't deny himself. And so there's consistency in the universe. I'd expect laws of logic. I know they're the same everywhere. I know they don't change with time because God is omnipresent and God doesn't change with time. He's beyond time. I can account for laws of logic and their properties. Secularists cannot. Or uniformity in nature. That just the idea that there's a degree of orderliness to nature, okay? And that there are laws of nature. I can account for that. And if you're a Christian, you can account for that. Unbelievers really can't make sense of that on their professed worldview. Now, they rely on it because they do know in their heart of hearts the biblical God. And they know that he upholds the universe in a consistent way. That's built into them. But if the universe were really chance, why would there be orderliness to it? We rely upon that principle whenever we expect past experience to be a basis for predicting what will happen in the future, right? And so when you go and you turn the key in your car, you expect the car to start. And if you've ever had it not start, you don't, for one moment, you don't assume, well, I guess the laws of physics and chemistry don't work anymore, right? That doesn't even occur to you. You say, well, I think the battery's dead, or the conditions have changed. You don't think the laws of physics have changed, not for a moment. But you see, in a chance universe, why would there be laws of physics? There's no lawgiver. Why would they be the same with time? See, in a chance universe, frankly, it's miraculous every time your car does start, because it's a chance universe. Why should it start? If your car doesn't start and you were really an evolutionist and a consistent one, you should say, well, yeah, it's a chance universe after all. Frankly, I'm surprised it worked this long. Or you get up in the middle of the night to get a drink of water and you stub your toe on something. It's dark, and so you stub your toe on something. You ever done that? Oh, that hurts. Now, the next night when you get up to get a drink of water, you're very careful not to stub your toe again, right? You say, this time I'm going to turn on the lights. This time I'm going to take it real slow. Why? You assume that if you stub your toe again, it will hurt again. And if you're a Christian, you have every right to assume that, because God has promised us to uphold the universe in a consistent way. But if you're an evolutionist and the universe is just chance, why would you expect that, right? Maybe the next time I stub my toe, it'll be the most pleasurable experience of a lifetime. Who knows? It's a chance universe, right? We rely upon this all the time. Morality, I think this is the easiest one to understand, and I'm going to focus in more on this one because people haven't thought a lot about laws of logic. That's kind of abstract. Or why are there laws of nature? That's a little abstract too. But people have thought about right and wrong, and people have very strong opinions on right and wrong. Just bring up abortion, and you'll see some opinions that come out. That's not right. Some people say, well, that is right, and so on. But how do the concepts of right and wrong even make sense in an evolutionary universe? If we're just chemical accidents. What one chemical accident does to another chemical accident is morally irrelevant. Chemistry just does what chemistry does. There's no right or wrong about it. On the other hand, in the Christian worldview, I can make sense of right and wrong. Right is that which corresponds to God's will, His approval. And because I'm made in God's image, I can know what that is. He's communicated that to me. And God will hold me accountable for my actions. I have a very good reason to behave in a particular way. I can explain why laws of morality are the same for all people. Right? You shall not murder. That's not just for me and not just for you. That's for everybody, because we're all made in God's image, you see. We're all accountable to the same God, and therefore we have the same moral standard. But evolutionists really cannot account for moral principles. They can't. Or why they should be the same for everyone, or why they don't change with time. Now, my point is not that evolutionists don't accept these Christian principles. My point is they do, and yet on their professed worldview, they would have no basis for it. If evolution were really true, they shouldn't believe in these things. And so when I'm talking to my atheist friend and he says, well, I believe in laws of logic, I'm going to say, well, technically you shouldn't, because on your worldview you can't make sense of them. Why should you have laws of logic when you have no lawgiver? Why would you have a standard for correct reasoning, and who decides what it is? How do you know laws of logic don't change with time or with space? I have a reason for those beliefs, but you don't on your worldview. Now, actually, he does have a reason on the Christian worldview, you see, and he's stealing from the Christian worldview to support his own. So you see, what it comes down to, on the surface, you can think of the biblical worldview and the secular worldview as just, most people think of it like, well, just take your pick, or whatever your parents believe, that's what you're going to believe, or, do you like blue, do you like flame color, take your pick. But what you're going to find is when you examine these carefully, you're going to find the Christian worldview, when we open up the hood, it makes sense, it can lead to knowledge, it works. The secular worldview, when we examine it carefully, can't possibly work, it can't go anywhere, it can't lead to knowledge. And we'll do this by what's called an internal critique. An internal critique is where you evaluate a worldview on its own terms to show that it's inconsistent. I'll give you two examples real quick. Relativism is the belief that there are no absolutes. All things are relative. People will say, that's true for you, but it's not true for me. You've heard people say that. That's very common in our postmodernistic society. They'll say things like, there are no absolutes. And of course, you're going to ask, are you absolutely certain? Right? Because what are they going to say now? If they say no, oh, okay, well, I don't have to believe you then. If they say yes, then they've just contradicted themselves, right? Because they've just made, the statement, there are no absolutes, is an absolute statement. If it's true, it's false. Therefore, it's false. Very easy to refute that worldview. Here's another one, though. A lot of evolutionists, remember, are strict empiricists. And you can demonstrate this as self-refuting. Strict empiricism is the belief that all truth claims are proved by empirical observation. So you make some kind of truth claim like Saturn has rings, you prove that by observing it. Now, some truth claims are proved that way, like Saturn has rings. but not all of them. But they claim all of them are proved that way, and therefore, if you can't observe something with your own senses, you shouldn't believe it. But then, of course, I'm going to have to ask, how do you know the statement itself is true? Was it proved by empirical observation? Think about that. The statement, all truth claims are proved by empirical observation, is itself a truth claim that has not been proved by empirical observation. You see that? Because that is a truth claim, and it's one that you can't observe, because you can't observe a truth claim, actually, really. You can't observe it. So if the statement is true, you shouldn't believe it. It's self-refuting. Secular worldviews, all of them, are self-refuting. All non-biblical worldviews destroy themselves on their own terms. You just have to push the unbeliever to be consistent with what he says he believes, and it'll come back and blow his own worldview up. And so on the surface, it may seem like we're on these two different islands and we can't get anywhere because there's no neutral ground. We know there's no neutral ground. That's true. I'm standing over here on my island of biblical presuppositions. The Bible is true, absolutes from God, laws of logic, laws of morality, uniformity, induction. My secular colleague is standing on some number of those principles. Maybe not all of them, but some of them. But what we're going to find is those secular ideas cannot lead to knowledge. They are sinking sand. That's the way the Bible puts it. Only the Bible provides a basis for actual knowledge. And so what happens when all that sand dissolves away, the unbeliever is left in a rather